In the small town of Brookfield, Georgia, a young African-American child was enjoying the pleasant autumn weather outdoors. However, when his dad came to check on him later, the little boy had completely disappeared. Fast forward 2 years, and, by pure coincidence, his father happened to look into his neighbor's dog enclosure. What he discovered there left him absolutely horrified. Derek Johnson cherished every aspect of life in his small hometown of Brookfield, Georgia. Nestled among sprawling cotton plantations and meandering dirt pathways, this was the type of community where neighbors still acknowledged each other with friendly waves, and weekend church gatherings on the lawn remained the town's main social event. Brookfield embodied tranquility, a place where kids could pedal their bicycles until dusk without any worries. However, that serenity was completely destroyed 2 years earlier when his child Tyrese mysteriously vanished. Derek's memory of that fateful day remained painfully vivid. Early fall had arrived, just before the weather would turn chilly. 6-year-old Tyrese had persistently asked to spend time outdoors with the neighbor's pet while Derek completed repairs on their damaged screen door. "Only 20 minutes, Dad, I promise," Tyrese had begged, displaying that signature gap-toothed smile that never failed to soften Derek's resolve. He had agreed. How could he possibly refuse? When Derek glanced up from his toolkit 20 minutes afterward, Tyrese had vanished. The subsequent search effort was enormous. Though Brookfield was small, when someone from their community went missing, the entire town rallied together. Citizens scoured the farmlands. The town sheriff, Derek's longtime friend from their school days, coordinated search teams that thoroughly examined every wooded area, aircraft circled above. Derek and his spouse Vanessa held each other tightly, clinging to hope that always seemed just beyond their grasp. However, days stretched into weeks, and weeks extended into months. There was no trace of Tyrese, no footprints, no abandoned belongings, no demands for ransom. It seemed as though he had simply dissolved into the humid Georgian atmosphere. 2 years afterward, Derek found himself sitting alone at his farmhouse kitchen table. The wooden panels surrounding him felt increasingly confining with each day that passed. The kitchen timepiece ticked rhythmically, unmoved by his anguish. Vanessa had departed for her sister's residence in Atlanta 3 months prior, needing distance from the painful memories that lingered in every room of their home. Derek harbored no resentment toward her decision. Sometimes he, too, wished he could escape, yet something anchored him to Brookfield, something indefinable. On this particular morning, a light fog covered the front lawn. Derek nursed his tepid coffee while staring vacantly through the window when sudden knocking interrupted his contemplation. Walter Green, their neighbor, stood at his door. Walter was a former long-haul driver, a lean man bearing a weathered complexion and hunched shoulders from decades behind the steering wheel. His land bordered the Johnson family's property. He had relocated to Brookfield approximately 6 years ago, following his wife's battle with cancer. "Good morning, Derek," Walter greeted, adjusting his baseball cap further down his forehead. "Last night's storm damaged part of your rear fence. Some sections are scattered across my property boundary." Derek exhaled deeply, rubbing his palm across his shaved scalp. "That old fence has been problematic. I've been planning to repair it for ages." "No worries," Walter replied. "Just thought you should be aware." As Walter prepared to leave, something troubled Derek's thoughts. Perhaps it was the heavy solitude that seemed to surround Walter's demeanor. Maybe it was that expression, overly careful, too calculated in the elderly man's gaze. "Are you working on any projects back there?" Derek inquired, gesturing toward Walter's yard. Walter paused momentarily, just a fraction too long. "Simply tinkering with the old dog enclosure," he responded, "considering getting myself another pet." Derek managed a courteous smile, though uneasiness crawled across his skin. It had been years since Walter owned a dog. His previous hound, Daisy, had died shortly before Tyrese's disappearance. As Walter descended the steps, Derek remained motionless for an extended moment, his coffee growing cold in his grip. Later that afternoon, Derek decided to inspect the property boundary himself to assess the damage. He trudged through the moist grass, his boots making squelching sounds with each step. The broken fencing lay scattered haphazardly against the tree line. Beyond it, Walter's backyard became visible. The lawn was uneven and overgrown in spots, and there, positioned between the twisted oak trees, stood the old dog kennel. Derek recalled it being there previously, a deteriorating structure with flaking paint and a drooping roof. But something appeared different now. A newer enclosure, more substantial and well-constructed, sat adjacent to the original one. Fresh, timber was stacked neatly nearby. Derek cocked his head. Walter seemed genuine about acquiring another dog. He was about to head back when he detected it, a faint scratching noise, like metal scraping against wood. He froze, his heart pounding in his ears. The sound originated from the old kennel. Curiosity wrestled with prudence. Every instinct urged him to retreat, to respect boundaries. But 2 years of unresolved questions, of sleepless nights and desperate prayers drove him onward. He crossed the fence line, boots crunching on the loose gravel that edged Walter's yard. Drawing near the kennel cautiously, he crouched down to look inside. The odor struck him initially, damp soil, something metallic and acidic beneath. Then he observed a section of earth that appeared disturbed, as if recently moved. Derek's stomach knotted. Looking more closely, he noticed a wooden panel covering the kennel floor, resembling a trapdoor. He spotted a small rusted clasp slightly misaligned, as though it had been used recently. With shaking hands, Derek pulled at the latch. The wood creaked, resistant after years of disuse. Gradually, the door lifted, exposing a dark, narrow opening. A set of metal steps vanished into the blackness below. Derek's blood froze. His immediate impulse was to flee, to contact the sheriff, to seek assistance. But another sound drifted upward from the darkness. A cough, a small, hoarse cough. Without hesitation, Derek dropped to his knees and called into the opening. "Hello? Is someone down there?" Silence. Then shuffling sounds, tentative, almost fearful. A voice emerged, weak and gravelly. "Daddy?" Derek's heart ceased beating. His vision blurred with sudden tears. "Tyrese?" he managed to choke out. "Tyrese, is that really you?" There was a whimper, then the sound of someone climbing the metal stairs. Derek scrambled backward, barely able to breathe. From the darkness, a small figure appeared, thin, pale, wide-eyed. It was Tyrese. His hair had grown longer, now matted and dirty. His clothing hung loosely on his fragile frame, but it was definitely him, his son. Derek lunged forward, wrapping Tyrese in his arms. The boy initially recoiled, as if unaccustomed to physical contact, but then collapsed against Derek's chest, weeping. "I missed you, Daddy," Tyrese cried. "I missed you so much." Derek held him tightly, rocking gently, tears flowing down his face. "Everything's all right, son," he whispered, his voice breaking. "You're safe now. You're coming home." Behind them, a door slammed shut. Derek turned just in time to see Walter Green positioned on the porch, shotgun in hand, his face contorted with fear and fury. Walter's heavy boots echoed against the porch as he stepped toward them, the shotgun gripped firmly in his weathered hands. Derek instinctively repositioned himself, protecting Tyrese behind him. His heart raced, every nerve screaming to defend his son at any cost. "You shouldn't have come here, Derek," Walter stated, his voice quiet, trembling with barely restrained anger. Derek straightened his shoulders. "You stole my child," he snarled, the burden of 2 years of sorrow and rage strengthening his voice. "Move aside, Walter, or I swear to God." Walter's jaw clenched. For a tense moment, it appeared he might raise the weapon. Tyrese whimpered quietly behind Derek, his small fingers clutching the back of his father's shirt. The sound seemed to trigger something within Derek. With a sudden movement, he knocked the barrel upward just as Walter squeezed the trigger. The shot exploded into the air, the echo destroying the evening's stillness and sending birds screaming. From the trees, Derek collided with Walter, dislodging the gun from his grip. They struggled intensely, bodies slipping and sliding on the wet grass. Years of buried guilt and madness confronting raw, unfiltered rage. Walter was wiry and desperate, but Derek was stronger, powered by something far deeper than physical strength. With a grunt, Derek pinned Walter's arms to the ground, breathing heavily. "Why?" Derek shouted, his voice cracking. "Why, my son?" Walter turned his head away, shame flickering across his weathered features. "After Daisy died, after Martha passed away," his voice broke. "I was so terribly alone. I didn't plan it, Derek, I swear. I saw him out there all by himself, and it felt like God was giving me another opportunity." Derek shook his head in disbelief, his grip tightening. "You kidnapped my son and concealed him in a hole. That's not love, Walter. That's evil." Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder by the second. Derek shoved Walter onto his stomach, twisting his arms behind his back just as the first sheriff's vehicle skidded to a halt in front of the house. Officers emerged, weapons drawn, shouting commands. Derek immediately raised his hands, stepping back from Walter. "He took my boy," he said hoarsely. "He's been hiding him right here all along." Two deputies rushed forward, securing Walter in handcuffs. The old man offered no resistance. He sagged in their grip like a marionette with severed strings, his head bowed low. Sheriff Ronnie Caldwell, a heavy-set man with a no-nonsense expression, approached carefully. His eyes widened when he recognized Tyrese peering out from behind Derek's legs. "Good Lord," Ronnie muttered. "Is that—" Derek nodded, unable to speak. His throat was too constricted with emotion. "We need emergency medical services here immediately," Ronnie barked into his radio. Within minutes, an ambulance arrived, lights flashing. A young paramedic, appearing no older than 25, hurried to Tyrese with a blanket, kneeling to meet him at eye level. "Hello there, buddy," she said gently. "I'm Cassie. We're going to take excellent care of you, okay?" Tyrese initially flinched, but allowed her to wrap the blanket around his narrow shoulders. Derek stayed close, never releasing his hand. As Cassie examined him, Derek noticed the bruises along Tyrese's thin arms, the unhealthy pallor of his skin, the slight tremor in his limbs. It devastated him all over again. Sheriff Caldwell pulled Derek aside. "We'll need statements, and there will be many questions," he said grimly. "But for now, just focus on your boy. We'll handle Green." Derek nodded numbly. As deputies escorted, Walter passed them toward a waiting patrol car. The old man caught Derek's eye. For a moment, Walter appeared almost pleading, as if seeking understanding. Derek looked away. There was nothing more to be said. Inside the ambulance, Tyrese sat quietly on the bench seat, gripping Derek's hand desperately. As they traveled down the road toward Brookfield General, Cassie whispered reassurances, her voice a soothing comfort against the boy's visible fear. Derek couldn't stop staring at him, memorizing every detail, every freckle. His son. After 2 years of nightmares and unanswered prayers, Tyrese was alive, yet the boy before him was a shadow of the child he remembered. At the hospital, doctors surrounded them. Blood work, X-rays, psychological assessments. Derek answered questions mechanically, barely registering the sympathetic glances from the nursing staff. Vanessa. He needed to contact Vanessa. His fingers trembled over his phone, heart pounding. When she answered, the sound of her voice broke something inside him. "Nessa," he rasped. "I found him, baby. I found our boy." There was a long, stunned silence, then a choked sob. "Is he all right?" she asked. He's injured, but alive. He's alive, Nessa." Tears streamed down Derek's cheeks as he listened to her cry on the other end of the line. "I'm coming home," she said. "I'm coming home right now." Hours later, after Tyrese had been settled into a private room, Derek sat at his bedside watching him sleep. The boy's face was peaceful, but occasionally he twitched or whimpered, lost in some unseen nightmare. Derek vowed silently that he would do whatever was necessary to help his son heal, whatever it took. Sheriff Caldwell arrived at the hospital. Around midnight, carrying a folder thick with documentation, he pulled up a chair beside Derek and sighed heavily. "We searched through Green's house," he said. "He had quite a setup down there. That bunker was stocked with food, water, books, toys. It looked like he planned to keep Tyrese hidden indefinitely. Derek's stomach churned. He fed him, taught him to read, taught him to fear the outside world, told him everyone else was dangerous. Caldwell shook his head, his jaw tightening. He distorted that boy's entire reality, Derek. It'll take time for him to trust again. Derek swallowed hard. Why? Why would he do such a thing? The sheriff hesitated. Grief can destroy a man's mind. After he lost his family, something shattered. In Green. He convinced himself he was rescuing your boy. It doesn't justify it. Not by any means. But it's what he believed. Derek stared out the hospital window, watching snowflakes drift lazily under the streetlights. Brookfield appeared so tranquil from up here, so ordinary. But nothing would ever feel ordinary again. He's going to prison? Derek asked. Caldwell nodded grimly. Kidnapping, false imprisonment, probably a dozen other charges. He won't see freedom. Again. Derek leaned back in his chair, exhaustion settling deep in his bones. He didn't feel victorious, only empty. Tyrese stirred, his small hand reaching out blindly in his sleep. Derek caught it immediately, squeezing gently. "I'm here, son," he whispered. "I'm not going anywhere." For the first time in 2 long years, Derek allowed himself to believe it might be true. The following days at Brookfield General merged into one another for Derek. Every morning he arrived early, sitting quietly by Tyrese's bedside, and every night he remained until the nurses gently encouraged him to rest. Vanessa returned from Atlanta the next evening, her arms shaking as she embraced her son for the first time in 2 years. Tyrese initially recoiled, confusion clouding his thin face, but Vanessa's tears and her whispered prayers against his ear seemed to reach something deep within. He hesitated, then slowly, tentatively wrapped his arms around her neck. It wasn't a fairy tale reunion, no dramatic gestures or swelling music. Just a fractured family finding their way back to each other, piece by piece. Derek and Vanessa spent countless hours consulting with hospital counselors, learning how to facilitate Tyrese's transition without overwhelming him. Dr. Patel, the pediatric specialist, explained gently that children in captivity situations often clung to the narratives their captors created. Walter Green had filled Tyrese's young mind with stories of a dangerous world, one where only Walter could protect him. Dismantling that illusion would require time, patience, and trust. Tyrese was withdrawn, his responses brief, his gaze darting nervously whenever strangers entered the room. He clung to certain routines Walter had established, waking at specific times, requesting permission before eating or speaking. Vanessa's heart broke every time Tyrese flinched at a raised voice or sudden movement. Derek understood the battle. They were fighting wasn't just physical, it was rebuilding a boy's entire understanding of the world. Sheriff Caldwell visited again, bringing updates on the case against Walter. They had discovered journals hidden in the bunker, pages filled with the old man's twisted rationalizations, his loneliness, and his determination to create a safe new family after losing his own. The evidence was overwhelming, Caldwell assured Derek and Vanessa that Green would be imprisoned for the rest of his life. Derek nodded, but he found no satisfaction in revenge. His focus was entirely on Tyrese. Days turned into weeks. Tyrese gradually began speaking more, asking hesitant questions about the house he once lived in, about the dog they used to have, about the swing set in the backyard. Tiny memories surfaced, fragile and flickering like candle flames. Derek and Vanessa made the decision to proceed slowly. No big surprises, no sudden trips. They returned to their farmhouse with Tyrese under the watchful supervision of a social worker and a child therapist who specialized in trauma recovery. Derek cleaned out Tyrese's old room before the boy even stepped through the door, removing anything that might overwhelm him. When Tyrese crossed the threshold, his small hand clutching Vanessa's tightly, he paused and looked around with wide, uncertain eyes. Derek crouched down beside him. "This is your room, son. Whenever you're ready, it's all yours, no pressure. Tyrese said nothing, just slowly stepped inside, brushing his fingers along the edge of the bed frame as if trying to connect with something familiar. That night, Derek sat on the porch, the old rocking chair creaking under his weight. He stared, out over the fields, bathed in soft moonlight, and listened to the cicadas singing their endless song. Vanessa came out and handed him a cup of coffee, sitting down beside him. For a while they didn't speak, letting the silence stretch between them like a well-worn blanket. Finally, Derek said, "I keep thinking about what might have happened, how close we came to losing him forever." Vanessa placed her hand over his. "But we didn't. He's here, and we have to believe he'll heal." Derek nodded, though doubt gnawed at him. Healing wasn't guaranteed, but maybe, just maybe, love was enough. The town of Brookfield responded in their own quiet way. The pastor stopped by with hot meals. Mrs. Garland from the post office dropped off handmade quilts. The children from Tyrese's old kindergarten class, now a bit taller and bolder, drew colorful cards with crayon hearts and smiling stick figures. Tyrese read them carefully, his brow furrowed as if trying to remember friendships lost to time. In small ways, Tyrese started opening up. One evening, Derek found him sitting cross-legged in the living room, flipping through a worn photo album. Derek sank onto the floor beside him. Tyrese pointed to a faded picture of a 4th of July barbecue. Little Tyrese sitting on Derek's shoulders, waving a sparkler. "Was that really me?" he asked quietly. Derek smiled through the tightness in his throat. "Yeah, buddy, that's you. You loved fireworks. Wouldn't stop laughing that night." Tyrese stared at the picture for a long time, then whispered, "I think I remember laughing." Moments like that made all the pain, all the waiting worth it. Therapy sessions continued every week. Derek and Vanessa sat through hours of counseling, learning new ways to be patient, to build trust. Tyrese struggled with nightmares, waking up crying about imaginary wars and enemies lurking outside the windows. Each time, Derek sat with him until he fell asleep again, murmuring quietly that he was safe, that there was no war, only peace and family. Over time, Tyrese's laughter, real, free, unguarded, began to return. He smiled, more easily. He asked if he could help Vanessa bake cookies. He rode his old bicycle, rusty from years of neglect, wobbling down the driveway with Derek jogging behind him, both of them laughing breathlessly. It wasn't perfect. Some days were harder than others. There were setbacks, tears, and moments when Derek wondered if the trauma would ever fully loosen its grip on their boy. But there was also progress and hope. Always hope. Spring arrived early that year, and with it, new life blossomed across Brookfield. Derek built a new swing set in the backyard, stronger than the old one. Vanessa planted wildflowers along the fence. Tyrese asked if he could have a dog someday. They smiled and told him yes when he was ready. One evening, as the sun dipped low, behind the trees and fireflies blinked lazily over the fields, Derek found Tyrese sitting on the porch steps, watching the horizon. The boy's face was calmer now, his eyes steady. Derek sat beside him. "What are you thinking about, son?" Tyrese shrugged but didn't look away from the sunset. "Just happy we're all together." Derek swallowed hard, his chest tight with emotion. He draped an arm around Tyrese's thin shoulders, pulling him close. "Me too, buddy. Me too." They sat there for a long time, father and son. No words needed. The quiet Georgia evening wrapping around them like a promise. After all the darkness, after all the fear and heartbreak, they were finally home, and they would never be separated again.